Study Section 6, Introduction to Web Programming, Cascading Style Sheet, CSS. Introduction. In the previous study section, we learned how to use some advanced HTML elements to structure and add more life to our website. In this study session, we will learn how to beautify our HTML using Cascading Style Sheet, CSS. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to explain what makes up a CSS rule, describe how to place CSS rules within your document and how to link to an external CSS document, evaluate how properties and values control presentation of different elements within your document, discuss how CSS is based on a box model and how you set different properties for these boxes, such as width and styles. Origin of CSS. Earlier versions of HTML used elements and attributes in the markup of the web page, just like the ones you have met already in the book, to control how a document should appear. However, the W3C decided quite a while back that the HTML and XHTML languages should no longer contain instructions that indicated how the document appears, rather that CSS should be used to control the appearance of web pages. The Cascading Style Sheet specification works by allowing you to specify rules that say how the content of elements within your document should appear. In fact, you can set different rules to control the appearance of every element in your page so that your pages start to look a lot more interesting. CSS works by allowing you to associate rules with the elements that appear in the document. These rules govern how the content of those elements should be rendered. Figure 6.1 shows you an example of a CSS rule which, as you can see, is made up of two parts. 1. The selector, which indicates which element or elements the declaration applies to. If it applies to more than one element, you can have a comma-separated list of several elements. 2. The declaration, which sets out how the element should be styled. Figure 6.1, example of CSS rule. The rule in Figure 6.1 applies to all H1 elements and indicates that they should appear in the Arial typeface. The declaration is also split into two parts, separated by a column. 1. A property, which is the property of the selected element that you want to affect, in this case, the font family property. 2. A value, which is a specification for this property. In this case, it is the Arial typeface. This is very similar to the way elements can carry attributes in HTML, where the attribute controls a property of the element and its value would be the setting for that property. With CSS, however, rather than you having to specify the attribute on each instance of the H1 element, the selector indicates that this one rule applies to all H1 elements in the document. Here is an example of a CSS rule that applies to several different elements. In this example, the H1, H2, and H3 element. A comma separates the name of each element that this rule will apply to. The rule also specifies several properties for this element, with each property value pair separated by a semicolon. Note how all the properties are kept inside the curly braces. H1, H2, H3, font, weight, ball, font family, Arial, Verdana sans serif, color, hash 000000, background, color, hash FFFFFF. Even if you have never seen a CSS rule before, you should now have a good idea of what this rule is doing. The content of each heading element named in the selector H1, H2, and H3 will be written in a bold Arial font unless the computer does not have Arial installed, in which case it will look for Verdana, failing which its default sans serif font, and this will be written in black with a white background. Where can you add CSS rules? The example that you saw at the beginning of the chapter used a separate style sheet or external style sheet to contain the CSS rules. This involved the use of the link / element in the header of the XHTML document to indicate which style sheet should be used to control the appearance of the document. CSS rules can also appear in two places inside the XHTML document. 1. Inside the head element contained with a style element. 2. As a value of a style attribute on any element that can carry the style. When the style sheet rules are heard inside a style element in the head of the document, they are referred to as an internal style sheet. Head, title, internal style sheet, /title, style type is equal to text /CSS, body, color, #000000, background, color, #FFFFFF, font family area, Verdana, sans serif, H1 font size, 18 pt, P font size, 12 pt, /style, /head. When style attributes are used on XHTML element, they are known as inline style rules. For example, TD style, font family, courier, padding, 5px, border style, solid, border width, 1px, border color, #000000. Here you can see that the properties are added as the value of the style attribute. There is no need for a selector here because the style is automatically applied to the element that carries the style attribute, and there are no curly braces. You still need to separate each property from its value with a colon, and each of the property value pairs from each other with a semicolon. Advantages of external CSS style sheets. If two or more documents are going to use a style sheet, you should always aim to use an external style sheet, although you may sometimes resort to an internal style sheet to override rules in the external style sheet. There are several advantages to using external CSS style sheet rather than internal style sheet or inline style rules, including the following. 1. The same style sheet can be reused by all of the web pages in your site. This saves you from including the stylistic markup in each individual document. 2. Because the style rules are written only once, rather than appearing on every element or in every document, the source document are smaller. This means that once the CSS style sheet has been downloaded with the first document that uses it, subsequent documents will be quicker to download because the browser retains a copy of the CSS style sheet and the rules do not have to be downloaded for every page. This also puts less strain on the server, the computer that sends the web pages to the people viewing the site, because the pages it sends out are smaller. 3. You can change the appearance of several pages by altering just the style sheet rather than each individual page. This is particularly helpful if you want to change your company's colors or the font used for a certain type of element wherever that element appears across the whole site. 4. The style sheet can act as a style template to help different authors achieve the same style of document without learning all of the individual style settings. 5. Because the source document does not contain the style rules, different style sheets can be attached to the same document. So, you can use the same XHTML document with one style sheet when the viewer is on a desktop computer, another style sheet when the user has a handheld device, another style sheet when the page is being printed, another style sheet when the page is being viewed on a TV, and so on. You reuse the same document with different style sheets for different visitors' needs. 6. A style sheet can import and use styles from other style sheets, making for modular development and good reuse. If you remove the style sheet, you make the site more accessible for those with visual impairment because you are no longer controlling the font and color schemes. It is fair to say, therefore, that whenever you are writing a whole site, you should be using an external style sheet to control the presentation, although, as you will see in the next chapter, you might use several external style sheets for different aspects of the site. Inheritance. One of the powerful features of CSS is that many of the properties that have been applied to one element will be inherited by child elements contained within the element that the rules were declared upon. For example, once the font family property had been declared for the body element in the previous example, it applied to all of the elements inside the body element, all of the body element's child element. If a more specific rule comes along, the more specific rule will override any properties associated with the body element or any other containing element. In the preceding example, most of the text was in an Arial typeface as specified in the rule associated with the body element. There were a few table cells that used a Courier typeface. The table cells that were different had a class attribute whose value was code. TD class is equal to code font size /td. Here you can see the rule associated with this element. TD code, font family, Courier new, serif, font weight, bold. This rule takes precedence over the one associated with the body element because the selector is more specific about which element it applies to. The way in which some properties inherit saves you from having to write out rules and all the property value pairs for each element and makes for a more compact style sheet. Some CSS properties. The following table shows the main properties available to you from CSS1 and CSS2. Basic example. The following example uses quite a number of CSS rules. The purpose of most of these rules should be clear by their name. After this example, you look at different aspects of CSS and how to control text, tables, white space, and backgrounds. Before starting, take a look at the XHTML document we will be working on without the CSS rules attached. Figure 6.2 shows you what the document looks like without styling. Figure 6.2, sample pages 2 without CSS. Here is the code for the document you saw in Figure 6.2, sample page 2, HTML. It contains a heading, a paragraph, and a table. Notice the use of the link element inside the head element, which tells the browser that this document should be styled with the style sheet specified in the value of the href attribute that is carried on the link element. Also, note how some of the TD elements carry a class attribute whose value is code. You use this to distinguish the TD element that contain code from other text in the document. Study the codes. The following table shows you the basic CSS font properties that allow you to change the appearance of text in your document. Figure 6.3 shows what this document looks like with a style sheet attached. Now, let's take a look at the style sheet used with this document. All CSS style sheets are saved with the file extension CSS, and this one is called Sample Page 2 CSS. You should be able to create a CSS style sheet in the same editor you are using to create your XHTML pages, and because CSS files are just simple text files like XHTML files, you can also create them in Windows Notepad or Text Edit on the Mac. Figure 6.3 Sample Page 2 with CSS. The document is mainly separate rules, the exception being the first line, which isn't really a rule, it is a comment. Anything between the opening slash asterisk and closing asterisk slash will be ignored by the browser and therefore will not be shown. Slash asterisk style sheet for sample underscore page 2.html asterisk slash. The first rule applies to the body element. It specifies that the default color of any text and lines used on the page will be black, that the background of the page should be in white, and that the typeface used throughout the document should be Arial. If Arial is not available, Vedana will be used instead. Failing that, any sans serif font will be used. Body color #000000, background color #FFFFFF, font family Arial, Vedana, sans serif. There is also a background color property for the body of a document because some people change the default background color of their computers so that it is not a glaring white. If you do not set this property, the background color of this user's browsers will be whatever color they have selected. The next two rules simply specify the size of the content of the H1 and P element respectively. H1 font size 18 pt, P font size 12 pt. Next, it is time to add a few settings to control the appearance of the table. First, to give it a light gray background, and then to draw a 1 pixel dark gray border around the edge. Table background color #EFEFEF, border style solid, border width 1px, border color #999999. Within the table, the headings should have a medium gray background color, slightly darker than the main body of the table. The text should appear in a bold font, and between the edge of the cell and the text there should be 5 pixels of padding. As you will see in more detail later in the chapter, padding is the term used for space between the edge of a box and the content inside it. TH background color #CCCCCC, font weight bold, padding 5px. The individual table data cells have 5 pixels of padding. Adding this space makes the text much easier to read, and without it, the text in one column might run up right next to the text in the neighboring column. TD padding 5px. Finally, you may have noticed in figure 6.3 that the cells of the table that mention CSS properties were in the Courier font. This is because the corresponding table cells in the XHTML document carried a class attribute whose value was code. On its own, the class attribute does not change the display of the document. As you can see from figure 6.2, the class attribute does, however, allow you to associate CSS rules with elements whose class attribute has a specific value. Therefore, the following rule applies only to TD elements that carry a class attribute whose value is code, not to all TD elements. TD code, font family Courier, Courier new, serif, font weight bold. Study section summary. In this study session, you learned that 1. CSS works by allowing you to associate rules with the elements that appear in the document. 2. A CSS rule is made up of two parts, selector and declaration. 3. The declaration is also split into two parts separated by a column. A property, which is the property of the selected element that you want to affect, in this case the font family property. A value, which is a specification for this property, in this case it is the Arial typeface. 4. CSS rules can also appear in two places inside the XHTML. 5. Inside the head element contained with a style element. 6. As a value of a style attribute on any element that can carry the style attribute. 7. One of the powerful features of CSS is that many of the properties that have been applied to one element will be inherited by child elements contained within the element that the rules were declared upon. This is the end of study section 6. Thanks for listening.